Okay, while everyone is joining, let's just go over what we did last time. I did some extra stuff and I shared the videos with you, but I'd like to show this to you as well. So I had just painted the backdrop, the base of this square.
Have you shared the videos? No, I haven't seen. I didn't see the videos of anything. I didn't see the link on this, so maybe you missed it,
Oh,
or
no,
I
I don't
missed it.
think the link is, I'm surprised it's missing because I uploaded everything last week. But let me just share the link right away as well before I forget. Oh, for some reason it's not uploading the YouTube, so yeah. So I will also share a process video where I've shown you how I've gone about this. Pretty much the same as we did these two, but in this one there were more layers, as you can see. So there was a background wash. On that there were light colored stripes which came first, and then the deep colored stripes. And I've also given a color breakup. So I'll share a picture of this as well. And then while I was painting this, it was taking so long because it's so humid. Colors weren't drying. So I decided to make this bag as well. The reference image of this bag I haven't shared, but this is just a random bag which I searched for plaid bags. And this had a red design, but I chose to surface this with the second check pattern simply because since I was making these colors, I thought I could just extend it and you could see an application of the swatch. Very often, this is how designers would make a swatch. So they would they would design it in its actual form. So these would be measured. You would have maybe an inch tall stripe here and gives you an idea of what the fabric would look like if it is cut into this size. And then when it is employed on a product, this is how it will look. And this gives you a good idea of usage so that you know that the form is going to be easily visible. All right, let's move on to today's topic. So I'm going to request those of you who can keep their videos on, please do, because sometimes it helps to see how you are sitting, where you have kept your water or your colors and everything. And I can just give you suggestions of how you can improve your practice even with that. So just to begin with, those of you who are right-handed, keep your colors, water, and all your equipment on your right-hand side. Nothing on your left-hand side, just your hand should be on your artwork as much as possible so that you're balanced. Many of us are in the habit of keeping our artwork here, writing or drawing or painting like this, while we will rest our elbow and rest our face on the hand, but that will imbalance your posture. And then the lines that you're trying to draw will be a little cumbersome. So better than that, anchor yourself with your non-dominant hand. That way your hand is able to move with much more strength. And as we go along, I will also show you a few exercises that you can do to help build strength in arm, wrist, forearm, and the shoulder. Hi, Sneha. Nice to see you. Last week you couldn't join, no? I think you were out.
I actually couldn't, so my work didn't finish on time.
Oh, that's sad. But I've shared the video of last week's
Yeah,
class.
yeah. I saw that. Yeah. I
What?
started to do it, so I'll complete it in this week.
All right. Not a problem. Anyway, what we're doing today or even next week is not dependent on that one class. So you can do it
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, so today's topic was suggested by Ashwita. That's really nice because I usually I enjoy it when the topic comes from the students. That way, I know that there is something that either you've been trying or you're curious about, and I can help you in creating that artwork. So even henceforth, if there are any topics that you feel, even if they're unrelated to stuff that we are doing in class, it would help to just share it on the group. And somewhere or another, I can accommodate either some techniques that we are going to use or something that will help you to build what the project that you're working on. That's how I would like the whole class to proceed. So the images that have been shared by Ashwita and inspired by those images, I've looked for some more, are of traditional Indian embroidered artifacts. These, I think, belong to the Dhangar or what are they called? Banjara community. So they use a lot of these kauris and they have a very thick embroidery which covers all of the fabric. So it really doesn't matter what fabric you use, they just cover it up with these beautiful colored threads. Much of it is also a version of or a form of the chain stitch or the daisy chain stitch. And to that, they will add these cowries. So this is an easy enough task for us to do once we are comfortable with making the stitches themselves. So I'll just go through all the pictures and look at what we have to work with. Here we have a lot of colors, but the stitches unfortunately are not really very clear. But if this is a piece that you enjoy making, we can use something similar, study the different stitches that are employed and come back to this and make our own version of the illustration. So this is something that you should look for, a much more magnified image of the stitches, because we can instantly see that there are so many different things happening over here. Unfortunately, in this case, the fabric is red and the stitches on top of it are all light. And we work with a medium that is translucent. So something like this would be very difficult for us to recreate exactly the way it is. But we can always make some modifications so that we can make our base color light and convert this design into a different color design using the same motifs, so that we can practice our stitches. Here's another version where if you go in a little bit, you have a light colored fabric. And like I often say, this is so peculiar about Indian design that hardly any attention is given to color combination or whatever. It's like, just take all the colors you have and your neighbor and neighbor's grandmother and everything and put everything in one piece, because God knows, God only knows when you're going to die. If this is the last piece you have to do and you like some colors, just put all of them in one piece. So that's the charm. Yeah, yes, Neha.
Yeah, I've got something like that at my place also. It has elephant motifs in it. So if you can see.
Yeah, just let me pin it. We'd love to see this. Yes. Wonderful.
And it's got elephants in it, and I don't know, quite a lot of things, quite a lot of colors in it.
All colors. Whatever you
All
get.
colors. Whatever color
is
you
looking
can
good. Yeah.
think of, everything
Yeah,
there. There's mirror work also here and everything
Correct.
in there.
Correct. Yes.
but I had a hard time finding pictures which were not like you know, with so many colors, and especially
Yeah.
the Batak pink is like one.
Actually, I think they use those colors only. Very bright colors they use, so it looks attractive from far away.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying, even some brands like Srujan,
Yeah.
I think they have a uniform, so they have blues and shades of blue, or pinks and shades of pink, which for me is very different.
Right.
Usually you see embroidery which is multicolored, but of late I have started noticing that, you know, perhaps they
That's
cater to a
because there
certain
are
kind of audience.
modern designers or artists, I think, involved in the, you know, the procuring or the.
Yeah,
So I think they give them the color schemes, and then
Yeah.
they do.
So a friend of mine has worked with Srujan for the past 30 years. She was linked with them after as a graduate program after studying textiles at NID. So yes, they do have a lot of designers who work with the craftspeople and give them color guidance. And Srujan, I'm glad you mentioned it because this is the one organization which has really pivoted the role of embroidery in Kutch. And they have a fantastic museum in Bhuj, which if you get the opportunity, you must go and visit. So I was commissioned to create illustrations for some of the embroideries for them. And some of them might be displayed in the museum also. It's really beautiful. A lady named Mrs. Shroff spearheaded this mission about 40 years ago, contacted all the local embroiderers and used to make them create stuff on certain things that she designed. And then she found a market for them and really helped to conserve this craft and made sure that everyone got their due. So now the museum has set up also an education center where, excuse me, they have training for the same communities that they can come and train properly with designers so that they know how to uplift their own craft and make it more international. So the Srujan Museum, the samples that they have gotten made, they have panels of maybe 1 meter by 3/4 of a meter, where they have these samples of different kinds of embroideries from the different villages, because each village has its own specialty and they do not transfer from the other village. So these panels were very carefully designed, where they were given the colors that would make it the best. So my friend used to give me all sorts of information about why the color. And of course, the well-known theory is the fact that the place that they live in is so barren. If you go to Kutch or if you go to Bhuj, you look around and you will easily be depressed. There is absolutely nothing. And in that environment, the more color you get, the better it is. So at least when you meet somebody, there's something new that you get to see. Otherwise, everyone is wearing, imagine if we were like a European people, everyone would be wearing black, which many of the communities also do, and then no color. It would just really bring everyone down. So I think that is the one thing that they enjoy. And the second thing I think is because traditionally we have had a lot of color. We have had blues and greens. It's there in the earth. So every community you go through India, there's no dearth of color. So I think it's more a celebration of a lot of things. So my analysis has been that all our activities culturally are about celebrating abundance. That is what you pray for. That is what you express gratitude for. So we can't do with one color and shades of it. That's like being so stingy with your gratitude. Just everything. If you have a puja in the house, panch phal. You need everything. You need 5 flowers or 10 flowers or whatever. Otherwise, it's not a puja. So I kind of tolerated saying that there's a philosophical reason behind it, or a geographical or a mental health issue, and I'm perfectly fine with it. But if I were to do any of these motifs, all the colors would change. They would become very different. So yeah, so we will try to replicate these colors, but I will leave that to you. I will allow you to just choose the colors that you want to, because that's the joy in taking a motif like this and making it yours. It does not really need to be the same as is, because otherwise, how then are you bringing in your personality into this artwork? Now, this is again another pouch-like thing. They make these lovely pouches. In the first picture is just a square that is folded in and made into an envelope. And these used to be storage for I'm sure there's a name to this community also. Yeah, so there we have this. Again, we have a dark background and light colors, but I'm going to show you one version in which we can try to do this. It's going to be a little tedious, but let's give it a shot. Just a small sample. And then this again, dark background and light colors. And this is a very common motif. You will have one mirror in the center and then 4 or 5 fanned out mirrors, and they fill up the whole surface with that. So to begin with, I will first start you off on just practicing a few shapes and a few stitches, let's say. But before we begin, I want to, I might have done this in your class last week also, but this whole week, and I'm going to probably be repeating this through the whole month. I want all the students to start getting into a practice of treating their piece of work in class like a composition. So if any of you have done some research on how to compose your paintings, you might have found that it is very difficult to come across one article or one instructional piece that tells you this is composition, this is how you do it. Like, for example, you will have something on color theory. You'll say these are primary, these are what's this, secondary colors, and this is how you match, these don't match or whatnot. There's a lot of stuff done on this. But in terms of composition, that is like a very intuitive topic. It's like there is one loose area where composition becomes pleasing, but it is so loose and it has so many versions that everyone somehow comes to that. They know that now I know that my composition is strong, but you don't know how you got there. So I want you to start coming into, so I'm going to put all of you on this like a trip. And we are going to go through different kinds of exposures to us of our own work. We are going to play around with all the elements that we want to put on our page, but there is going to be a certain amount of thought given to that. So first things are that I am going to start giving you an idea of what all we are going to do on the page, because I have it in my mind, but you might not. So I don't want to start off on one side and then suddenly you don't know whether you should start in the center or the corner, and then I've suddenly moved elsewhere, and that throws you in a tizzy. So knowing beforehand what you want to do will always help you to compose better. The other thing is, if you are in the habit of testing out your swatches. So I'm just going to show you how things sometimes happen in books. So say, for example, you are painting something over here. You will, it's a very nice picture. You're doing this, and then suddenly you are mixing some colors, and then you'll try whether your paint, you've got the right shade, and you try to do it like this, or versus at the edge of the page. And then you come over here. Now, this is there are some artists that tend to do that, and that's perfectly fine if you are working on a sheet that later on is going to be cut, and then you want to leave the swatches for you to study so you know what you used in that painting. But in our case, we are not really cutting this out. We are going to keep this in our book. So when you say, for example, just seeing it yourself or showing someone that this is what we did in class, they are going to see this whole thing. They're not just going to see your painting. And then you think, oh, okay, you know what? I'm just going to hide this and say, don't look at this part, just see this. This has come good, but don't look at this. So I want you to imagine a situation where your book is available for the best artists to see in your absence. So don't have anything on your page which you feel you need to hide for any reason, because mostly this might be available to somebody to see without your presence. So we are going to, whatever we have to do, say we have to make some swatches or something, you can make them in a disciplined shape. So either a square, a rectangle, or a circle, and you can write down properly. And I'm going to show you how to do that, what colors you've used. If you choose, if you do like that swash, make all of them in a line and then write below that what the colors are, what it is composed of. So there's lots of things we can do and still make the picture look well composed. So today I'm going to start you off with a set of 3 squares on this side, which will be to practice our stitches. We are going to be using a medium-sized brush like a 4 or a small brush like a 0 to draw different stitches or paint different stitches, so we know what to expect. Then we are going to make some squares on this side and this side, where we are going to make samples of some of the motifs used in these embroideries. Since many of these motifs are made on large pieces, like you would have a choli or you would have a ghagra, you might not have the opportunity to make this on one whole item, except for maybe a cushion cover or something like that. So as of now, we are going to just practice the motifs, and I leave it to you to then put it onto another object whenever you get the time. So as of now, we are just going to have 3 squares here and 4 squares over here. Knowing this, how do we make these squares? Leave a little bit of a gap from all sides always. You need to have some uniform gap, because when our eye sees any painting, this gives us relief. This is like when you enter into the house, you don't put your dining table at the door or a sofa at the door, because you need some room to then come into your home. So you leave some room for the eye to enter into the space and then start seeing what is all around over here and then really enjoy it. So in this space on the left, we are going to make 3 squares or rectangles. I'm not going to insist that they must be identical, but we can try it. So we want to make about the same amount of or the same height and width of the squares. Use your fingers, just dance around a little bit and see how much would be enough. So this space is enough. This can be about 1.5 inches or so. Always start from the center and then outward. So here's how I'm going to do it. I want you to just see this first and then you can do it. I'm leaving about 1 finger space from the left and making sure that the space at the top and the bottom is about the same. And I just have to draw a straight line from one finger to the other, as straight as I can go. It is a little wobbly, but that should be fine. Using this measurement, I will first make this square right in the center of the page. And now I can build the next square. When I'm making this, of course, I have to make sure that these lines are one below or one above the other. And the spaces between box number 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 should be equal as far as the eye can see. So I'll first make the distance lines. This is about the same. And then use the same measurement to make your box above. Now, in case you don't measure accurately and the box on top is bigger or smaller than the box in the middle or the box at the bottom, you know what happens? You or your eye will not be able to tell those minor differences as long as these distances are the same. So at any given point, the eye judges, balances on the smallest distances between objects. If they are uniform, the other things can be all kinds of shapes, it's still fine. It will also look at alignment. These alignments, vertical and horizontal, are also very pleasing to the eye. So now that we have this, we know how much space we have on the side. We also can mark out the center of the page from figuring out the center of the middle square. That's somewhere over here. The same distance that I've left this, I can do the second box also, but I'm going to increase the space just a little bit and just a little above the center mark and below the center mark, so that I leave the same space as the earlier boxes. I'm going to make 2 boxes this time, but I'm leaving extra space on top. That's why I wanted you to see me do this before doing it yourselves, because if you feel I was going to make the whole box, then you would have been in some soup. Now, in the event you feel that the lines you have drawn are really bad and you want to correct them, or they're not one below the other or whatever, my advice to you is first correct the line. Don't first erase the line. There is some reason because of which your brain thought the first line that you made is where the line should come. If you erase that line before drawing the corrected line, chances are you are going to draw the same line again and again and again. So first draw the corrected line and then then erase the line that you're unhappy with. All right. Now to make some basic stitches that you can see in these artworks. I can't remember the names of all the stitches, but here's what we're going to do. First, we will draw a few horizontal lines in the first square, but don't start from the top. Always start from the middle. Use your finger to figure out where the middle of the square would be, and then draw a light line horizontally. One tip, hold your pencil far away. Whenever you're making horizontal lines, hold the pencil vertical. Whenever you're making vertical lines, hold the pencil horizontal. Keep the pencil perpendicular to the line that you're drawing. Goes the same way with diagonal lines. Whenever you're drawing a line, say a vertical line, if you're drawing it like this, our hand is very unstable, so it'll start wobbling. But when you're drawing it like this, you can anchor your wrist and just make a line like so. And if it's a longer line, you can maintain the angle of the pencil and just drag your hand down at the same angle, and you should get a reasonably straight line. Once you have halved your square, halve it further. So you get 4 parts and they are all equal. If we try doing this from the top, chances are we are never going to get them equal. And then you can keep dividing it into halves. They may not be equal, but they would be reasonably equal, at least not unpleasant. And also you don't get stuck with a tiny space or a very big space at one end. All right, now let's look at the image and study the stitch. So here we have all these chain stitches. And here we have like what is this called? Like a blanket stitch, I think. And we can make both these stitches between the lines that we have made. And we can use these same colors, although maybe you can use a green and pink. And here I think it's herringbone. Can you see this? This is a herringbone stitch. So we definitely have 3 different stitches to work with. Here again, there's a blanket stitch. So let's try to use colors that are similar to the colors we see in our piece. We don't really need to match colors, but matching colors is a skill and you don't get that overnight. The more you work with colors, the more familiar you become with how colors behave in the company of each other. So if we were to make that green shade, it's a very small green shade between in the middle in that diagonal piece. It's like a muddy green. If you have the 24 color kit, you could probably get this as hooker's green. But if you don't, then here's the color match you can make. I'm using sap green. To that, I'm adding a little bit of raw umber. This will make the sap green a little more subdued. And to that, I will add a little bit of cobalt blue. Remember, the colors that we have are all they all have the ability to change the personality of other colors. Some colors are vibrant, some colors are mature, some colors add a warm hue, some colors a cool hue. So it's a wonderful exercise. At least I find it wonderful to just sit around, play with colors and see what one shade is doing to the other. Now, when you are mixing colors, here's another tip. Avoid putting all the new colors, like when you're creating colors, avoid putting the color right in the middle of the puddle till you are sure that that's the shade you want. So I'm taking a little bit of yellow ochre now and I'm adding it to the side. And I'm moving this around. In some places, I will see a lighter tint. In some places, I'll see a concentrated color. And I will be able to tell if these are the shades I'm looking for. If I'm happy with this, then I'll go ahead and add the same color to the entire puddle because I need a large quantity. And I also need this to be rather thick. So the same colors will help me build a good amount of paint so that I can start painting. At any rate, we are going to get like a suggestion of the color. We are not trying to match the color 100% because watercolors are different, fabric dyes are different, plus all of us are seeing a different image on our devices. All devices have a different kind of brightness. Plus, we have settings, so we set brightness differently. They have different kinds of surfaces to show images. So go by what you see with your eye. So in your device, if you see the green a little bluer, add a little more cobalt. If you see it brighter, make it bright. So now that the colors are ready, we're going to try making a chain stitch. And I want you to just observe this first so that then you can make it easier. Those of you who are familiar with embroidery, there's a good chance that you will think of this as a stitch where you will loop a thread and then you will take your needle underneath the fabric and then take the loop around the needle and then pull on the thread. Now remember, anything that's underneath the fabric is invisible to us. So using a thin brush, this is the 0 number brush, on the lines that we have made, I am now making just a series of teardrops that are linked to each other. So I'm moving, this is a slightly difficult shape to make, so you can make it from the top and from the bottom instead of looping it. Because when you loop it, if you've not held the brush right, this loop will close. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter because sometimes even embroidery threads close up on the eye and you don't see the hollow inside. So I'm linking it in such a way that the inside of, sorry, I'm going to make it a little bigger so that you can see it. I'm magnifying this whole thing. You don't have to do this, but it'll just help you see what I'm doing. So this is my stitch. And then I'm going in a little bit, pretty much imitating how I would make this if I were actually embroidering on fabric. So I'm not just touching the loop to the head of the previous loop, because then that will look very different. Now, when you're doing this, if you feel that it's too detailed, that your hand is shivering, you're not able to make this in a straight line, check a few things. Are you holding the book or are you holding something else? Are you holding your breath? Don't hold your breath. Relax. And use this like almost like a rhythmic meditation process. Every time the brush comes down and makes contact with paper, exhale and draw a line through the exhalation. Inhalation is involuntary. You will inhale. But exhalation is a voluntary act. And very often there have been students in class who have held their breath so long, they haven't even realized it. And then suddenly they're clutching their pencils or their brushes and everything is very stressed and all the lines are shaking. So do this actively if you feel your line is shaking. Now, the other reasons why your line might be shaking is just that your muscles aren't strong yet. So doing an action like this will help your muscles out. Okay, now the next thing we can do is use the same color. Or shall we change? I think we can change the color. Forget it. This way we can test out all the colors also. So let's try making the pink. I'm just going to jump into crimson. And I'm going to use a light crimson. So when you use a light color in watercolor, avoid using white. Just keep your color very slim, not too pigmented. So this is crimson, and I'm taking very little bit. And I'm going to just keep it a little dry. Not too dry because I still need some lines. So I'm using just a little bit of that. And I'm going to try making that herringbone stitch. So here's my crimson. It's quite a deep color. But I'm removing much of it so that I have less pigment. Now I'm turning the book on its side and I'm going to make this shape. I'm going to make a line coming inward or down. Another line going on top of that. So making these X's literally one on top of the other. And in this case, we don't really want our colors, our lines to be too thin also. Because otherwise it'll look more like a design made for brush than with thread. The threads they use are often cotton threads and cotton or silk. And these threads can spread out quite a bit. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm making some lines from the left, some lines from the right, but instead of making all of them from one side first and the other side next, I want to imitate the construction of that herringbone stitch itself. Because in that process, I'm imagining taking my needle out and in and out and in and structuring it more organically like a herringbone stitch on cloth. Again, when you're doing this, try to hold the book in an angle that is most conducive for you to draw these tiny, tiny lines. Keep your wrist down, keep it on the paper. I don't think I would have been able to do this well enough horizontally. That's why I turned it on its side. But that doesn't mean that all of you have to do the same. If you find that this is an easier angle for you, you can make the same design sideways, also from left to right, right to left, whatever works for you. Now I want to try one more thing. I want to make another herringbone, but a thinner version right next to it, where I will make the lines a little more horizontal, not as vertical. So here I'm, actually let me make it bigger, forget it. Because I want to, in my head, the line on the stitch was very, very obtuse. But it's not that upright, no. It's much more horizontal. And this time I'm deliberately making my lines even fatter because I want less and less space in between these lines. They should be there. Whatever comes organically, great. So even when something like this happens, your lines are not going all in the right direction. Some of them are closer, some of them are far away. That is the charm of handmade. And I suspect that even in the embroidery piece, there will be a lot of places where the stitches are not exactly mechanically placed one next to the other. There is going to be a little bit of human error, and that's fine. And then the last stitch that we have, we can make that in a small section because I want to show you how to make the cowries as well. Then all the elements will be covered. So let's erase a little bit of the right side of these last two lines. Don't draw a vertical line. Oh, another thing. When you are making this composition, please do not write the title, the date, or your signature on the front. And definitely no title, no date in the beginning. And don't make pencil borders also. The title must come in the end. The date is not important. You can write the date in the back. And as far as signing your work concerned, this is not something that you should be signing. Of course, this instruction doesn't apply to you, but if you really feel that you need to sign, please put it in the back for now, because your signature must not be the same sign you use on your checkbook. It should be a designed signature. So we'll come to that. All right. So the next stitch is fairly easy, and let's use a gamboge for this. That's the warm yellow color here. It may or may not be visible, so just to keep it visible, you can add a little bit of yellow ochre. And let's try this one thing. You don't have to put yellow ochre in all of the, in the entire color. You can just put a little bit in every third or every fourth stroke. So I'll have this color activated and available, but I won't use it for every stroke. This time round, your stitches are going to be like what do you call blanket stitch? So blanket stitch is just a stitch like this. It comes, it's like an inverted L shape. And you can make it very close or very far. And I'm changing the color to a little bit of yellow ochre. If it is really far, then it looks like this. And if it's very close, again, just make a shorter line. Now, if you feel like it, you can also make it like L shapes. This is not how it's constructed. So those of you who are not very familiar with embroidery stitches, you won't feel the pain of it. But trying to embroider this upside down is very painful. And sometimes you don't get it accurate. This part, the tail end of the upright L, must extend into. You cannot embroider it like that, so I'm sorry, but we can illustrate it like this. And I would recommend do this only under duress. Otherwise, turn your book around and do it like a proper not herringbone, blanket stitch is made. Is everyone with me? Okay. So now let's try making that cowdy shape. Just look at any of the cowdies. I'm looking at the one on the top right, on the northeast side. You will notice that it's got two curves which are not identical. So that's always a blessing when you're doing nature drawing. Hardly ever do you get identical of anything. So you draw one curve which is slightly shallow at one end and a little round at the other end. And then from the other end, it's a little flat and almost uniformly flat coming towards the other side. So it's like a weird shape. It's like a teardrop shape that somehow, somewhere just went flat. When we look very closely at that partition between these two shapes, right in the center, you will see that there are almost like teeth-like ridges. So here we can make a shape like this. You make a curved shape coming inward that rounds off along the edge from both sides. This essentially is your cowdy shape. We can also make a little bit of a hole there and draw a thread, since we are showing how to illustrate that cowdy being stitched onto fabric. It's not just a cowdy that we are playing with. And in a few places, you can create these ridges if you want to. Now, this is a completely optional item. towards the ends, you can try to make these ridges very tiny and uniform, or you can completely ignore them. Now, to make the cowries look real, or at least realistic a little bit, let's do two different things. You need to just put in a little bit of a shade in there so it does not shine out really white. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre. Oh, there's already red in my brush. Yes, this is yellow ochre. And add to that a little bit of cobalt blue on the side. These are the two colors we are working in. Please note how little I've taken out. This is just barely enough to make one stroke with my brush because you don't need too much. It's really important that you know exactly how much you should load your brush and how much paint you should use. So if you want to just observe this, can I show you? This is a quick operation. I'm going to take a little bit of this very liquid yellow ochre, and I'm going to add it in one stroke along the end like this by just pressing the brush. Okay, wait, I'm not done yet. And then on the inside, just like this. So it's not full. You don't make it like a half moon shape. We have to just press the brush down. So start with the point, press it down somewhere where it will splay its bristles, and then as you come closer, just lift it up and you get a nice sharp line. It is possible that your stroke might not touch the pencil line. That's okay. Even if you get it a little away, keep it inside. If it is outside, it'll look like a shadow. So it's no harm, no foul. This will give us that little bit of depth that we need so that it doesn't look like just a gaping hole in the embroidery at the end. Now we take, after you're done with this stroke, we take the deeper shade, which was yellow ochre mixed with cobalt blue, and add that on the inside. It's a very light color, so it's just going to give a little bit of a shadow on the inside. It's not too dark. All dark colors need to be built layer upon layer. So don't be in a rush to paint it a dark black. Shadows which are flat in one color can also make the picture look flat. Just because you're putting a shadow does not mean that it is automatically going to make your artifact or your object look like it's three-dimensional. Once this is dried, in the same color, which is just like this little color, can you see it? It's like compared to my nail, it's so tiny. I'm going to add just the teensiest amount of black. And even in this, I will first go at it from the side to check the color. No wonder I had to go to the eye doctor yesterday. I work on such small scales. But it is truly worth it. And then just take a little bit so your brush is mostly dry. And then go to some of the areas like the center, which would be the darkest. Deposit the black in that area. Then wipe the same brush and drag a little bit of that black to the edges, just a little bit. So you get a variable shadow, deep in the center and slightly less on the corners. You can repeat this process again. If after the color has dried, you realize that it is not deep enough, go ahead and repeat the process. And this time round, you can also add a little more depth with some dots along the corners. All this is the next step. You may or may not want to do it, up to you. And then after this is done, finally, we will take either a blue or a black. In this case, let's take a blue, a cobalt blue. I already have some of this. And either one side on the left or on the right, you can do the same thing like that stroke. This time you have to be careful that it doesn't go into the kaudi. Just draw a line along one side with a very light wash, watery blue to create a shadow. This is too much paint, so I'm wiping it away. In any case, even if you think you've taken too much paint, it all depends on how much water you've taken. If there isn't too much, if there's adequate water, your colors will dry at least 30 or 40% lighter. So you don't have to worry about, oh my God, this is so dark now, it's not looking like a kaudi, it's not looking like a shadow. Let it dry before you decide to criticize it too much. All right, now before we move to the next embroidery, let's make one motif or a part of the design over here. So we might have to break this up a little bit, or you can modify it also. This is a one complete motif, the diamond shape. But we have made 3 different stitches, which are in 3 different places, and one kaudi. So the kaudi is here. Then I have this motif here. And then I have the herringbone stitch here. So just look at the frame that I'm trying to make. You may have 2 kaudis, a V shape, another parallel V shape, a little bit of the triangles of the square motif. This should do it. So I'm going to cut out a part of this and share it on the group. So we can maybe just make that much. That way everything will be seen. Yeah. This should be enough. I'll just share that scan cutout. So everything we see inside the blue line, we can make that. Now, I don't know whether your squares are squares. My square is not a square at all. It's more horizontal rectangle. So I'm going to choose what I want to make. I'm going to start off with the kaudis at the bottom, more or less in the center, and then start making the design from there on. Since we are doing art, we are not writing a composition. We are under no obligation to start from the top left and then come down like that. Start from wherever your drawing makes sense. And then if everything fits in, great. But even up to this level, we do get chain stitch, we get this herringbone, we get the blanket stitch and the kaudi. So it's fine. So start from the bottom. And in keeping with the casualness of the lines also, let's not keep our artwork too formal as well. I'm making the central circle a little to the right of the center. It's a little wobbly. Then I will make those kaudi shapes properly, but they are not identical. One is slightly more upright, the other one is slightly slanted. you can mark out some of the colors with double lines. Like this is a double line for the yellow. Then from its top, I will draw one line that goes like this for the chain stitch. Another line that comes sideways but goes a little behind the cowdy and comes and joins the line here. When I had to do this project for Shujan, it had taken me a long time to figure out what would make the embroidery look good, because I thought I might have to perfect these lines. But in that, I realized everything was looking so artificial and so boring, almost like some AI had made that embroidery or that illustration also. But when I allowed for the lines to be a little wobbly, a little imperfect, the embroideries look fabulous. I'm going to look for them. They're in some work folder from 5 years ago, I think. But they are just so charming. I may have pictures I can probably share. So follow the threads. See how the thread also bends in a few places. There are overlaps in a few places. That is what will make the whole thing look cool. I'm just going to go fetch some water for myself. So I'll give you a few minutes to draw this. Just give me a second. I need to make an urgent call. I might have to take a call afterwards. Hopefully, I won't disturb the class too much. Okay, have you finished the drawing bit? Right, now you know what stitches we have made. We just have to fill these spaces up with those stitches. I think we can use a much more concentrated pink. This is looking very light to me. The first color we will use can be gamboge. So all the places where there are, the filling is gamboge, you can use that. So there is a line here. Now scale your stitches according to the stitches we see. Oh, too much water. So I have come across embroidery samples which are drawn very shoddily. And I feel that like you would spend so much time in making mandalas or something, where there's the beauty of all those circles or all those designs is in the patterns. here we have the opportunity to enjoy this pattern. So trying to finish this really fast will take away 50% of the joy of the finished product. So enjoy this building of the texture. Oh, I have gone and merrily changed the sequence of threads. But that's okay. Now, in the place where we have the chain stitch filling up an area, there we do exactly the same thing. Mind you, if you're moving your book around, make sure that you don't put your hand on wet paint. I know this sounds like a very basic instruction, but believe me, if I don't say it, you will suddenly have put your hand there. It has happened in lots of adult classes before, so I prefer to warn, and not just with students, with me. I've also done it myself. Okay, so I am just going to repeat the same stroke on the inside. So really, literally, I am following the pattern as I see it. And here again, when you make a turn, just turn the stitch to the right. It still ends in the loop itself. And in some places, you could probably paint some extra. So you don't have a very even rectangular space or triangular space, sorry. Are you able to make these shapes? Is everyone okay so far? No complaints. I don't hear any groaning.
My squares are, I think, excuse me, I think they're really small. So it's almost like very, very tiny. So I think that's one thing which I'm noticing. So
Okay, so just see if they're smaller than this. Our hands are not too, might not be too different.
Yeah.
So do they come, this is your first knuckle, second knuckle, do they come anywhere?
I think it's a little, yeah, it's not so big. I think it's around 2/3 of that.
Okay, so it comes till about this knuckle.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then you can actually make a smaller part of the embroidery also if you want. Unless, of course, now you've drawn it and.
No, I've already started painting, but like I'm just realizing it now.
Never mind, it's okay. Now for the next part, we can make chain stitch over here. Now see, in this case, we have the kauri, then we have a black stitch going in the middle, and then there's also a pink chain stitch going on the sides. And between that, we have the yellow blanket stitch. So I am leaving some room for both those. Unfortunately, because this is a light color, I will be able to, if I feel the need to cover it up with the pink chain stitch that's going to come from there, it won't really hamper the design much. That's why it's always safer to paint with light colors first. Are you getting a feel of the embroidery come up in your pictures?
Yeah.
I'm loving how this is looking.
So Aditi, two like consecutive chain stitch lines are merging with each other because the color has not dried. So should I wait for the color to dry?
No, let them merge. It's okay. Which ones are merging? The ones over here?
In the triangle.
In this? That's okay. Mine have also merged. See, they're not, you can't really distinguish. You can't see one from the other eventually once it's dried. But it does create a texture. Also see if there's too much water, because we do need some kind of texture between the lines. If you have been going in around like that, then you will get, by the time you come back to the same place on the inner part of the triangle, the outer line should have dried. So maybe you need to reduce the water, add a little more color, or then just pull out. So this is what I do. Just if there's too much water, I just pull out the paint, let it dry a little bit, add extra paint to the drier paint, and then pick that out.
And the idea is to paint exactly how, one would stitch.
If you can do that, that's the best way to get exactly the same result.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way you can create that texture.
Yeah.
Like for example, in this triangle now, there is a concentricness to the lines.
Yeah.
If we are tempted to just fill up the space, we might go ahead and fill them up like this, which is unnatural for embroidery. You wouldn't take a thread that goes over there and come all the way back over here from the back of the garment. So you will do this, and if you just need to fill up that space, you will take a right turn and left turn, right turn, and continue till you fill up the space. That's how you do it. And that's what we want to imitate. So automatically the denseness or the texture, sorry, not the denseness, the texture of the embroidery will just reveal itself by the time you finish the picture. To keep it, sorry, I got bumped off. This part of the recording might not come in the recording that I share with you. Okay, so a few things that you can do. I do it just because I'm such a nerd. But some stitches I will start halfway. I won't start all the teardrops, especially over here where the fabric is ending, because then it looks too designed. So when I'm ending over here, I'll make a small stitch over here. I studied a lot of this when I went to design college. And before that also, I had a very artistic grandmother who taught me everything from embroidery to knitting and stitching, and I took to it like a fish to water. So I have been doing these things since I guess the age of 3 or 4, and I'm very comfortable with this, almost like it's part of an appendage of my body. But when I went to college, I realized that that is not the case with everyone. So the muggles who were in college with me, who did not know embroidery, who'd never done it before, would take 3 hours to do something. And I would finish in about 15 minutes or something. Then I would knit or crochet or embroider everybody else's samples. So I realized that I have developed a certain logic for how things work, even an illustration of the thing that I can make by using embroidery and thread and needle. But that may not be the case with everyone. So if you have not done a particular stitch, if you've not held a needle and thread and done this kind of embroidery or any kind of embroidery, there will be a little jump you will have to do. You have to try to either imagine how it might be. You must have done a little bit of thread and needle work. If not, you can just study how the thread looks over here. And by now, all of us, I think, can figure out a logic by which the thread goes from one point to another. And just use that to figure a few things out for yourself. And that goes for all sorts of embroideries, not just this. There is a connection between one point and another point, either from the top of the fabric or the bottom of the fabric. And in illustrating embroideries, you just have to make that connection and repeat the process. All right, now the herringbone design, as you might see, is in this section. And the interesting bit is, if you look at it closely, it doesn't end in a V shape over here. We have 3 wobbly lines, really wobbly lines, which I have only space for 2. So I'm going to make 2 which are evenly spaced. And then a similar structure on the other side for the herringbone. Again, this is where that logic comes in. If I were embroidering this piece, I'm not going to go and make, of course, if I were going to do it for like a Gianni Versace or something, I will do that. I'll go through the trouble of ending my herringbone stitch at an odd angle, but not for this piece. And in that also, it creates a very beautiful texture, almost like an overlap. So here we can bring back our crimson color, leaving a little gap from the right, but not from the left, or at the bottom, but not the top. You can start building the pattern a little away from the edge because you might not be sure where the line on the edge comes. And start making your herringbone stitch. Now, this is the first time that your colors will come very close to each other. So you have to be careful to not touch the previous color if you can help it. In some places, if you touch, it's fine. If this is becoming too tedious, don't make 3 divisions. You can make 2 bigger divisions. That's also fine as long as you use this texture to fill up that space. This time I've used a much more concentrated crimson color because the light color is looking too light. So I'm getting rid of the vibrancy of the light color for just the combination of this bright pink along with that very mature green and a brilliant yellow. Now the other places, over here, we can again make the blanket stitch. And now we have a curve behind this kauri. So I'm going to first make that blanket stitch in a straight line behind that kaudi. I'm not going into that curve yet because this I know has to be straight. I can see it. Oh, I came too close. There's a black line here. And I'll continue this in the same way. So here again, you have to make the edges vertical. Don't finish that stitch there. Don't turn it on its side. In some places, the stitches will continue straight, but they will appear shorter because they will be overlapped by that kaudi. Did any of you have stitching or embroidery in school? We used to have that in school.
I had it in till class 10. So 8th, 9th, 10th, we had home science.
Right.
And
I still do embroidery. I would send some pictures.
Oh, please do. Yes.
Yeah, I still do embroidery. I've gifted few of my friends their children's names on an embroidery hoop.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
It is just so charming.
So I do embroidery and crochet even. So I love crochet.
Huh.
So yeah.
How nice. Please share the samples now. We can use that also to practice.
Sure.
Okay, now the last bit is the kaudi. So I'm going to, again, do the same thing, make a curved line first. This is going to be my guideline. So it's a little rounded towards the edges and comes in, pinches in a little bit. And then some indents. And then that really light. Acha, here's one more tip. Sometimes when I need very little color, I just go to the side, the edges of these cakes also. There's always some color hiding over there, just available. And that is good enough for something like this. You don't really need to take it into your palette also. I'm finishing off the, oh, sorry, the stitching by near the circle, continuing the same stitch throughout. My pink has become so light. I don't mind going over it one more time. Now again, don't use the pink to outline around the kaudi. This time, we can use the cobalt blue and black and yellow ochre color. And just create a little, so not very dark, but a little shadow just underneath. Very light. This has become too dark. Hopefully that'll merge. Yeah, just on the outer edge. So it's a very subtle line. And if you have any crimson over there, it might also get swept away in that shade. Then I'll add that slightly deep color again in the center first. Wipe the brush and pull it to the side with the tips. And then this one I'm adding while it is still a little wet so that it spreads on its own. Never underestimate the visual power of these subtle shadows. Very few people I know do this for their artifacts. It's a very tiny detail. And in many cases, I've found amongst Indian artists who work with realism, it almost seems as if they take it too casually and they don't want to put in the effort because they feel that nobody can see. And they might be right. You really can't see certain things. But there's a difference in seeing and perceiving. Your eye can perceive it. Even if you put something like this 4 feet away, your eye will perceive the subtle shadows in the kauri around it and perceive the depth. So it's worth taking time making multiple layers in the shadows. Okay, so our time is up, but lots to do. Do you want to continue the same next week?
I wouldn't mind. I would love to learn this.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
me too.
So we can.
Super. So let's just take our time with this. Let's do more of this. In the meantime, I think this first embroidery is clear, right?
Yeah.
So you should be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can complete it.
Great. Okay, so that's nice.
I would love some help with Kauri next time, Aditi. I think because my bit was small, and I also think I had erased that part, so it became, it became a little blurby and blurry.
All right, we can try it.
I think so. We can make only the cowries like individual, little bigger ones, and then practice on that. I think so. That will also be nice.
Yes. In fact, for that matter, if you want, there are a whole bunch of things that you can see in embroideries which are pulled in. There are rhinestones, there are some gold threads, or these things. If you find those also, just share those as well. So we can,
Okay.
other than thread, what are the other things that we can put in embroidery? Sometimes there are pearls,
Beads, wooden beads are there.
lots of things are there. That could be another very interesting exploration.
Okay.
Aditi,
Yes,
just one quick question for the black line.
right.
So when we are we'll still do the same chain cutting, no? Or we'll do the crosses for the black.
No, the black is also chain stitch, no?
Chain stitch, I think so. Yeah.
Haan, theek hai. Okay.
Yes, just do it as a chain stitch.
Okay. theek hai. And the all the pink basically is in the middle is going to be cross, is it? If you can just show yours, then I can explain.
Yeah. So not in the middle. There are 3 different things.
Haan.
In this area, you have chain stitch, which is this.
Haan. Correct.
This area, you have this, which
The
is
crosses.
herringbone, yes. And in this area, we have blanket stitch.
Correct.
Then again, over here at the bottom will be a yellow chain stitch like this.
Haan, theek hai.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so the middle portion,
This.
so that will all be crosses just next to each other, right?
Correct, yes. Like how we've done over here.
Correct. theek hai.
Just first this whole row over here and then this thing
There.
over here, coming down this way.
Got it. theek hai.
But no, actually it's going up that way. Either way, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. theek hai.
All right. If you
Okay.
feel if you're confused, put the question on the group. Either me or somebody will
theek hai.
help you
theek
with that.
hai.
answer. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Tata.
Bye.